Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgilio, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Dr. Keisha Davis. She's the county's health officer. Dr. Nina Ashford, Chief of Public Health Services. Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Deputy Chief of Public Health Services. Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. And our guests today are John McCarthy, Montgomery County State's Attorney, Eric Friedman, Director of the Office of Consumer Protection, and Julia McGlamory, and she's Administrator, Adult Protective Services for the Department of Health and Human Services. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, Mr. County Executive.
Good afternoon. And again, thank you everybody for being here this week. Last week, we talked about the gold bar scam and how the state's attorney's office filed charges against 5 people after nearly $3 million have been stolen from victims. And I appreciate having State's Attorney McCarthy join us today to talk about this case, as well as highlight the efforts of his office to protect our older adults. I've seen this for years. I mean, even back when I was a council member, John and his office were doing the rounds of community groups and, some meetings at a number of different centers in order to raise awareness of the vulnerabilities that seniors have. And this is just another example of it. According to the key findings in the University of Michigan's national poll on healthy aging that was published last November, in the past 2 years, 75% of people aged 50 to 80 reported experiencing a scam attempt, and 30% experienced fraud. And if I had been polled, I would have been one of those folks in the 75% who did experience a scam attempt. Older adults facing cognitive or physical challenges are also more likely to be the target of a scam, and they have a worse fraud experience compared to those who are in better health. These are pretty alarming numbers, and with new technology and more sophisticated methods, we have to expect that this is going to get worse. Also, in the University of Michigan poll, it was noted that over 83% of all older adults want to know more about how to protect themselves from scams, and nearly all believe that policymakers and companies should do a better job of protecting people from scams. And I've always been amazed at the inability of Congress to actually strongly legislate against this kind of action and provide penalties that would be truly a deterrent to doing what these folks are doing. But that's why I'm glad we have Eric Friedman, our Director of Office of Consumer Protection, along with Julia McGlamory from Adult Protective Services, to highlight some important resources and their outreach and engagement efforts. The county's Office of Consumer Protection was established in 1971 to ensure a fair marketplace for consumers and businesses within Montgomery County. Its mission is as clear today as it was back then: to protect health, welfare, and safety of the general public and honest business enterprises. Our Department of Health and Human Services is also worried about the financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, and Adult Protective Services follows up on tips from the public to help protect our aging population from abuse, neglect, and becoming victims of financial crimes. So I want to thank you, John, Eric, and Julia, for taking the time to be here, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm honored to be involved in this partnership because I think that the number one way that we need to protect the people in this community, and I'm joining with the county executive and my dear friend Eric Friedman from Consumer Affairs, who we work with all the time in educating the community. Education is our best tool here. These scams are being operated outside of the United States. Why do I say that? Is because we have brought together, besides the wonderful work that Montgomery County Police has done to identify the victims and that have resulted in 5 arrests, we know that there are additionally nearly a total of 20 victims so far, with $6.1 million of losses in Montgomery County. As Mark alluded to in his comments, these scams are being targeted specifically and mostly in our county to senior members of the community. It is not exclusively a Montgomery County issue. We had the FBI, Homeland Security, here with us with Chief Yamada, warning the community about this last week. And we know that based on BOLO reports that have been sent out by the FBI beginning in January of this year, this is a nationwide problem, but has taken hold here in Montgomery County. It's international in scope. The thieves this is organized crime. It's originating outside the United States. According to the FBI, it primarily originates in India and China. The FBI has coordinated with the Indian government in one pretty massive arrest of a call center there. So a couple of words of advice to individuals regarding this scam. Number one, if a phone number comes up on your cell phone and you don't recognize it, do not answer the phone. Number two, if a pop-up ad comes up on your computer screen and you're at home, do not click on it. The chances of recovering the money in the scam, and this is how it works in a nutshell, someone will call you. They will pretend to be with the federal government. They will in some way communicate with you that your you've been hacked and your finances are in peril. They will ask you and say, we're from the government, we're FBI agents. We want you to convert all of your cash to gold bars. They'll tell you where to order the gold bars. When they're delivered, they will offer to come and keep them for safekeeping for you. And we had one victim in Montgomery County, one victim alone, who lost almost $1 million by herself. The federal government does not communicate with you by phone call. It doesn't arrange these kinds of scams. If you are overseeing the financial resources of a senior in our community, we ask that you warn them about this. I'm going tomorrow to my third senior community to talk about this. It's something we need to educate the community about. That's why I really welcome the invitation from the county executive to join you here today. I think it's about public education. Know that this is not the way the government does work, and you need, and I know my friend, Mr. Friedman talks about this all the time. Two most dangerous things in your home if you're a senior are your phone and your computer, because people have the capacity to literally get inside of your home to begin perpetrating these frauds against you. But we should be very thankful to the local police department. I want to give thanks to them. There's a Detective Petty who's led these investigations under the direction of Chief Yamada. And we've had more arrests here in Montgomery County than in the entire rest of the state combined. People are now calling us for advice on how to deal with this. But public education is the key. Prevention is the key, because the bars, once they are taken into the custody of these individuals who send couriers to pick them up, they're almost completely untraceable. So the best way we can protect our seniors and protect ourselves is through education. And again, that's why we had our press conference last week. And that's why I'm honored to join the county executive today. And again, repeating our warning to the community.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCarthy. I believe, Julia, you're up next, and then Mr. Friedman.
Wonderful. Thank you and good afternoon. Adult Protective Services, or APS for short, is a social services program mandated by the state of Maryland, serving older adults and adults with disabilities who are in need of assistance. The APS team of social workers and nurses investigate cases of physical and sexual abuse, neglect, self-neglect, and financial exploitation. Financial exploitation includes the misuse, mishandling, or exploitation of property, possessions, or assets of vulnerable adults. It also includes using that adult's assets without consent, under false pretense, or through coercion and manipulation. 34% of Adult Protective Services investigations this year included financial exploitation as an allegation. This is a 76% increase in financial exploitation investigations over the last 10 years in Montgomery County. The APS team works with victims of financial exploitation and their supports to reduce the risk of further exploitation and to connect victims with supportive services to maintain their safety, health, and independence. APS works also closely with the state's attorney's office and Montgomery County Police Department through the Elder and Vulnerable Adult Abuse Task Force to address the increasing incidence of financial exploitation in our community. We also work with the task force and many additional community partners, such as the Office of Consumer Protection, to engage the community in outreach and educational opportunities, including our annual World Elder Abuse Awareness Day event each June. If a community member finds themselves or a loved one may have been a victim of financial exploitation, please call us at 777-3000 to make a report to Adult Protective Services. All reports are anonymous. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Director Friedman?
Well, thank you, Julia, and State's Attorney John McCarthy. You know, we all work together. No silos here in Montgomery County. We are all working together to protect the residents of Montgomery County. You know, the gold bar scam that John McCarthy's office has taken action against is probably the most recent type of imposter scams. But imposter scams facing consumers never end. And we really need to worry not just about gold bars, but we got to worry about the golden rules that we can do to protect our residents in Montgomery County. The types of imposter scams will always be out there and will always be changing. We're talking about IRS scam and Social Security scam and banks pretending that it's the real bank contacting you and it's not. There have been sheriff scams, police scams, jury duty, grandparent scams, post office, utilities, charities, Amazon, Federal Express. It never ends. Keep in mind that to these scammers, every day is Halloween. These imposter scammers are going to be using a mask and a costume or trying to convince us that they're someone other than they really are. And so it's very important to consumers to be very careful, as John talked about, with computers and telephones in our office and in our homes. They really are the most dangerous devices that are out there. The pickpocket days are gone. And so now we really have to worry about what we're going to do with all these scams that come to us by another means. And so, you know, we've learned to lock our front doors, we've learned to lock our house doors, and now we have to worry about and learn to lock our digital doors, which is our computers. And we have to make sure that we don't give passwords that are going to be obtained. We have to make sure that we treat our passwords like toothbrushes and keep that information private. We have been working to educate the residents of Montgomery County. Our office and the State's Attorney's Office has been going out. In fact, tonight we're going to be going to Leisure World with the police as well to talk about these very scams. We've been to Riderwood and Asbury Methodist Village and Holiday Park and the Rockville Senior Centers, and we've worked with Congressman Raskin's office and Senator Chris Van Hollen's office. And the Commission of Women is also having classes that we're going to be doing because the word has to get out there that we have to protect consumers. And it's a dangerous world, basically. I mean, we can't even trust our caller ID phones when we see who we think the person is. So it really is a situation where consumers have to hover over email messages. When you see one, do not click on it unless you are sure of who's on the other end of that computer. And you're better off contacting them and not listening to responses and fake email messages that you might be receiving. So we're lucky to have, as the county executives said, a vibrant and active consumer protection office that's been around for 53 years. We've got a great team here, and we will continue to help and protect consumers. We have our first podcast out there called Consumer Connection. We have on YouTube channel. Under ConsumerWise, we have a wealth of information there, and we're here to help work with everyone to protect our residents in Montgomery County.
Thank you, Director Friedman. Members of the media, we will open it up right now for questions regarding protecting older residents financially. Please raise your hands if you have any questions for our guests today. Any questions regarding protecting older residents in the county? No questions about this topic? Well, thank you to our three guests this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. You can remain on the call, but if you need to go, you can step away. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
County Executive.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you all for being here. I want to share some important phone numbers that can help victims and family members that want to report anything strange. The Adult Protective Services hotline is 240-777-3000, and it's available at any hour every day of the week. And the Office of Consumer Protection has an anonymous tip line, which is 240-777-3681. County residents can also call 311 for help. So hopefully everybody gets this information. If you're doing a news story about this, please provide the information of where to contact us, because the gold bar scam is news, but the other part of the news is we're able to help, and we need people to understand how they can help. Moving on, teachers returned to school on Monday to prepare for the students in the start of the school year. And in some places, they were greeted with hate language. And this has now occurred multiple times. It's the same MO for every one of these. It's very similar images and the appearance of the images, and it's really deeply disturbing. Graffiti featured anti-Semitic language, swastikas, and slurs targeting the LGBTQ plus community. They were found on 4 school campuses, and every incident was reported Monday morning between 6:30 and 9:30. The schools targeted by vandals were Churchill, Wooten High School, as well as Falls Mead and Strathmore Elementary Schools. In an email to parents, MCPS leaders expressed shock despite this coming just one weekend removed from a similar incident at Bethesda Elementary School. One incident might be shocking, but the repetition of these acts is a serious problem. People are entitled to their opinions, and there's no lack of places to express them, but defacing property and targeting schools and houses of worship is not acceptable. It's especially troubling that many of the messages are targeted at places where you find youth in large numbers and who are already struggling in the aftermath of COVID with the social and emotional challenges that created. This is not anything but destabilizing for people, and particularly for young people who don't understand, many of the issues that are being raised, and it's not healthy for the community. So these acts are disturbing, and the goal is simply to divide our community. There is nothing to be gained by doing this other than to inflame the current situation and turn neighbor against neighbor. And I wish the people who are doing it would think about what happens if everybody decides this is the way to appropriately display your disagreement with any and all policies that you just happen to disagree with. This is not the way civilized people behave. And I think we expect better, and we certainly want better. And I'm confident there are far more people in this county who are horrified by these attacks than are people who support them. We'll work to stop what's going on by stepping up security and police patrols as necessary. Trust us, we will prosecute people who do this. All hate incidents and graffiti like this should be reported to 301-279-8000. On Saturday morning, we had a devastating fire that impacted dozens of families in Clarksburg. The fire left 24 apartments uninhabitable and displaced 43 residents. 2 residents were treated for minor injuries. 3 family pets were killed. I want to thank our first responders and partners for the quick response to this fire. It started with firefighters who helped get people to safety and put out the flames. More than 75 firefighters were called to the scene, and 4 were hurt, but luckily no one suffered any critical injuries. Red Cross and the Department of Health and Human Services have been working closely to help fulfill the needs of these families. They work to provide temporary shelter for some victims, while other volunteers like Clarksburg Closet Support supplied essentials like clothes and toiletries. If anyone has any questions or needs help directly from the county, I hope they call our DHHS navigation phone line. That number is 240-777-4141. Also, if you want to help families impacted by the fire, the county has joined with MHP to help identify unmet needs and to manage donations. So visit MHP, actually I'll say this better, mhpartners.org, one word, MH Partners, for more details. While the investigation to this fire is ongoing, it was an act of arson and a juvenile suspect has been charged. The suspect was quickly identified because there were at least 2 similar previous incidents of fire setting. I was angered and disappointed to hear that the Department of Juvenile Services released the juvenile again and did so without any kind of monitoring for him. This juvenile clearly needs significant interventions. He needs help. But DGS has left both the community at risk and failed to provide a timely mechanism for this youth to receive support before they cause other harm. We've had to work with the family to scramble to find an alternative, but it's a very imperfect solution because of the DJS inaction. DGS is a Department of Juvenile Services, a state agency, and there's been, a lot of criticism of some of the changes in the laws governing juveniles. So the release of the juvenile, because there was not apparently an intent to injure or kill people, has been done now 3 times. And I totally agreed with all the legislative efforts to end the school to prison pipeline. We send too many people to jail. We sabotage them for the rest of their lives. And doing this to young people is really inappropriate. And doing it to people who have mental health problems is just the totally wrong solution. So jail was the wrong place to put people. But in supporting the changes that kept people out of jail, myself and others advocated that we've got to create a system where people who need help actually get help. If you just simply return them to an environment where they weren't able to get any help, even when the parents tried to get them help, all you're doing is making this situation worse. So when the state has a facility that's meant for a person like this, the state needs to use the facility. And we continue to urge them to get this kid the help he needs, because if he ever hurts somebody, then he's going to wind up with adult criminal charges, and then it's going to be jail. And then all this talk about helping somebody avoid jail is going to be for nothing. So I hope we can reach an agreement and also start setting up programs that provide the kind of space for people who need help, so that instead of waiting for them to get arrested, we get them help before they need to be arrested. So that's my soapbox on that for today. But it's frustrating, because it's great to care about kids, but then you got to actually demonstrate that you're going to do the things they need so they don't wind up in the place you're trying to keep them out of. On to other things. Later this week, I'm going to join Democratic leaders from around the nation in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention. I've never attended a national convention before, so I'm looking forward to the experience. And it's a good reflection of the importance of Maryland and the Democratic Party that have so many key speakers at this gathering. I had the opportunity to listen to Jamie Raskin's speech yesterday, and it was masterful as usual. And I look forward to listening to Angela Alsobrooke's speech tonight. And I believe Governor Moore will be addressing them tomorrow evening. I also watched President Biden's speech last night, and I was glad to see he received so much love and gratitude for the great job he's done as president. A few weeks ago, when he decided not to run for election, I shared my opinion that he's been one of the best presidents for working families since FDR. And I'll be more blunt than that. He's been the best president for working people and working families since FDR. And his commitment to, economic justice and trying to make it possible for everybody to build the kind of life that, we used to call the American dream is, I think unparalleled. That he's the only president to walk a picket line. And I'm really glad to see he had the courage to do that. Interesting thing about doing these weekly media briefings for the entire tenure of Biden's presidency is that I can literally go back and watch my reactions and responses to the challenges that we faced in January of 21. COVID was flaring, hospital and ER rooms were at capacity. We had an insurrection. We had to send our police down to DC to help deal with it. And the economy was struggling. The difference between how Biden handled all these issues and the Trump administration handled the pandemic was noticeable immediately. There was a swift rollout of vaccines. There was the implementation of relief measures that helped protect our community's health and stabilize our local economy during the unprecedented crisis. And the Inflation Reduction Act continues to bring substantial benefits to our county. We are applying for grants. We have been the recipients of grants. This legislation helps to reduce inflation. It helps us meet the needs that we've identified without having to solely rely on tax dollars or worse of all, not do anything at all because there's no funding to do it. So this has been really important for us. It helped reduce inflation, which is still not down far enough, and that I blame on a certain head of the Fed, but I think interest rates should begin dropping next month. But it also it also provided provisions for lowering prescription drug costs and extending health insurance subsidies and investing in renewable energy. These measures directly support the well-being of our residents and contribute to a more sustainable future. And anybody who's willing to tackle big pharma and be willing to intervene when drug prices are clearly completely out of whack compared to what they should be and compared to the cost that it costs to produce these drugs. The idea that insulin had to be regulated is just ridiculous. And if you ever want to have fun, pick a drug or prescription you get and then go to England or look in England, look in Canada, and look in Europe to see what they pay over there from the same pharmaceutical companies for the same drugs over here that we're paying multiples of what they pay overseas. These actions have provided us with a stronger framework to address the climate crisis, to protect our communities and protect our natural resources. So I really have appreciated his leadership. And he's also focused on creating a stronger economy that's yielded positive outcomes for working families. So the initiatives like the American Rescue Plan, we've seen investments in infrastructure, education, workforce development that have bolstered economic opportunities for our nation. And he always put the needs of working women first. He was quite remarkable in doing that. He's been the right president at the right time, and history is going to note that Joe Biden achieved more in 4 years than many presidents achieve in 8. So I appreciate his leadership. I really appreciated the warm reception he got last night. And I think if anybody listened to his speech, it was pretty strong and it was pretty focused, and it was not the way it came off. He was not the way it came off in that unfortunate debate. I was really appreciative of the message. Also last week, as I mentioned, I was in Ocean City, Maryland for the National Maryland Association of Counties Summer Conference. And among the topics we focused on were childcare, Medicaid, and K-12 education. There was a lot of discussion in sessions regarding the impact of AI on local governance, and some of our county employees were on panels, as well as our initiatives were being spotlighted, such as the Drone as First Responder program. We're still the largest jurisdiction in the country that has this program, and I'm one of only a very few that has it, and it's been successful enough. And I've mentioned this before, they're actually going to be expanding the program. On the last day of the conference, we heard from Maryland Governor Wes Moore, and I appreciated the governor's candor about the challenges we face, and also his optimism that Maryland can continue to prevail. Prevail is something we need to do. The economy has been stuck in the state for a long time, and I could have a longer discussion about what I think has got us stuck. But the governor is looking at it and examining, how did we get in this mess? It's one thing to bemoan it, which I think people are pretty good about bemoaning these things. It's another thing to actually analyze what things you do to be successful. In Montgomery County, we've been spending a lot of time analyzing Virginia's path to success, and we can point to the year and the events that led to the change in Virginia's trajectory and the corresponding failure of the county to do the kind of things that Virginia did in order to set the groundwork for the kind of development they had. And it may surprise many of you to know that it was a Republican legislature and a Republican governor that set in place the structures in Virginia that made it possible for the Northern Virginia counties to succeed. And there'll be much more about that as we go through the coming weeks. Moore understands how addressing social issues gives everyone a better opportunity to succeed. It's hard to enjoy the American dream if you don't get the education you need, if you're living in, inadequate housing, if you're rent burdened, and if you're housing cost burdened. All those things are impediments to adults and to children. And I share in the governor's plan to restore Maryland's as a leader in public education, which we used to be. And we're still pretty high ranking in the country, but we're no longer the top. And there was a time when we were, and we've gotten away from that. And we need to get serious at putting ourselves back where we belong. Governor Moore was unequivocal in his support for the blueprint and the urgency to fund its requirements. But, other settings, he also recognized that we're going to have to talk about how and when we do things, because between the state's challenges and local government challenges, the ability to manage this on the previous timeline is not likely. The state doesn't have the funds to provide the support that many of us expected that would come from the state. And you can't spend what you don't have. None of our budgets allow us to do that. So there's going to have to be some adjustments to our ability to deal with the blueprint, and I think focus on, really priority issues. Hopefully we'll get to that point and we'll be building a stronger economy while we're doing that work. The governor is also very clear the state's facing the structural budget and revenue challenge. At MACO, I did take every opportunity to talk about and share my thoughts with county and state leaders on my hopes for tax reforms, more local tax autonomy, and a progressive tax rate, all things that can be done while reducing the tax burden on most residents in the county and in the state, as well as enabling us to build an infrastructure we need to support and foster economic growth. We have to find ways to do these things. And it's a path that Northern Virginia took, but our county and our state ignored. It's time to stop ignoring it and get down to doing the things we need to do. I look forward to continuing these conversations with state and county leaders, as well as our residents over the coming months prior to the 2025 General Assembly session. Before I take your questions, I'll give my health team an opportunity to update you on any of the current health issues, and then we'll be back for questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. We just want to put a friendly reminder, school starts next Monday, which means if you have not gotten your kiddos vaccinated yet, please take the opportunity to do so. There is an event on Saturday at Montgomery Wheaton Mall. We will have our team there providing free back-to-school vaccinations for all of our young people. So please do take advantage and make sure that your children are vaccinated. I'll turn it over to Sean. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder that we are still in the summer COVID wave of transmissions. All of our other respiratory diseases are down, but COVID is still sending people to the hospital. It's also ragweed season, so those of us who suffer from ragweed are well aware that this happens in August, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have a respiratory disease. But if you have something new and it's causing symptoms that you don't normally experience, please take care of yourself. Stay home if you're sick. And again, we're trying to limit the spread of COVID to our vulnerable populations, our seniors, our folks with underlying conditions. And don't be afraid to wear a mask if you have respiratory symptoms. That is recommended, or if you're going to visit somebody who is a vulnerable person.
Thanks. Nothing additional from me. I just echo all the sentiments from our fabulous public health team.
Dr. Stoddard?
Nothing additional from me. Let's take questions.
Okay, we'll take questions now. Members of the media, raise your hands for general questions. Brian Sears, Maryland Matters. Good afternoon, Brian. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, County Executive. I wanted to back up and ask you a couple of questions about MACO and specifically about your any meetings that you might have had with the Maryland Department of Transportation related to county priorities for transportation and what you've been told to expect.
It was not as bad as we thought, which is another. So you could say it another way. It was better than we thought. But it's not good. I mean, basically, unless you've got a shovel in the ground, you're not going to see money to put shovels in the ground. And the state's concerned about the ability even to fund preliminary planning for projects, not knowing what the basis of funding is going to be. So it's kind of what we expected. There's no reason to believe that they suddenly saw a massive infusion of money into the state that would enable them to build the trust fund back up. So, there are going to be efforts to put money into the trust fund, but it's not going to be the trust fund that they thought they had. And I'll point out, the trust fund that he theoretically inherited turned out to be a lot of vaporware, not really there. they didn't spend down the $8 billion. There wasn't $8 billion to spend. So there's, problems that are, I think structural here. So we're dealing with our projects as best we can. But this is one of the issues we've raised with the state, and there's a lot more sympathy to it now, is moving to the system that Virginia uses, where they use special taxing districts to raise revenues. It's on commercial property, but it's only used to build transportation projects that benefit, commercial property. So all you got to do is look at Virginia, which everybody likes to do, better than staring at your navel, I suppose. But look at Northern Virginia and look what they were able to do, and look at the infrastructure and put a price tag on the infrastructure they built in Northern Virginia, and then put a price tag on the amount of money that Montgomery County's been able to spend, or the state's been able to spend. You see a really stark difference. And it begins, 12 years ago, maybe a little bit before that. They went on a different path. And, it's time for us to look at the path they went on and stop pretending like it doesn't exist. And people need to stop saying that Montgomery County is a higher tax jurisdiction than Fairfax, because when it comes to development, if you want to be specific about the thing that provides jobs and economic growth, Virginia way outspends us and way out taxes commercial property compared to the tax rates in Montgomery County. And, we've sent this message to the state as they're trying to figure out what went wrong. What's gone wrong basically is the failure to build infrastructure. And what went right in Virginia was the recognition, which is something everybody knows, which is the transportation is a key to economic development. Business leaders in the region have said that the transportation issues in the region are the number one impediment to economic development. And I remember reading an article in the Post about that back in about 2017, when they were talking about it. And Virginia took that message very seriously, and nobody else did. And in our county, for years, we would just say, oh, we better not spend any money, because if we spend any money, then the state's not going to give us any money, because they'll think we can do it ourselves. And the result of that brilliant policy was that they didn't spend any money and we didn't spend any money. So we didn't build anything. All these things that sit in master plans never got done, while Virginia promptly went ahead and built out the plans they had. So, you kind of get what you pay for. And in this case, weren't willing to pay for very much. We didn't get very much. And Virginia provided a much more attractive environment in terms of transportation, which means workers and customers being able to come to where you are. And Montgomery County did not do that. And I think it's time to take our heads out of the sand. I've been preaching this for a while. Hopefully people have listened to enough bad news for a while. They're actually going to be willing to do something about it. And if we don't do anything about it, we shouldn't expect any better results than we've got so far.
Hey, County Executive, in my conversations with some of your colleagues and peers in other counties, there were two issues that came up, and I'd like to ask you about both of them. The first one being that a number of them told me that in their meetings with MDOT, they were informed that projects that were of particular importance to them were being delayed, or I believe the word that was used was paused. Is Montgomery County in a similar situation, and what projects of particular importance were paused or delayed?
We didn't get a list of specific projects. It was they don't say this is delayed and that delayed, but their basic message was, if there's a shovel in the ground that we've made an investment in, that funding is what we're going to be able to continue. But they may not be able to continue even things like planning for a project. And so if you delay planning, you just further delay even the time you can put a shovel in the ground. So, and it was pretty clear that even shovel-ready projects aren't going into the ground with the amount of money they have. Now, the legislature could remedy some of this stuff. They could make decisions on how to raise revenues. And I haven't been shy about this. This state doesn't do combined reporting. The former Confederate states, where everybody likes to say, oh, they're going to Texas, they're going to South Carolina, they require their businesses to do combined reporting. Florida does combined reporting. So Republican states apparently understand that you should tax corporations for the businesses that are done in your state. We have not gotten that message through in Maryland. That would open a lot of money to the state of Maryland on an ongoing basis. It's not a one-time benefit, it's multi-year benefit. Working with us to create a tax structure where counties are able to tax like they do in Virginia, with the caveat again that it has to be used for transportation, and the state would not have to fund the amount that they currently have to fund. And, you know, just so everybody understands, I mean, Montgomery County delegation is far from the majority of the state, any county, and all the rest are smaller than us. So the idea that you're going to get legislators across the state to pour all this money into funding for the large counties is just not realistic. It's never been realistic. The ability of the state to manage all the projects that people want is just not possible. And so they're going to have to do something. I'm hoping that the state or the state reaches the conclusion that they should give counties the ability to do what they need to do, because, you know, we can explain it locally. We can assure people that whatever we do, the revenues are going to be spent locally. It's an advantage that we have that the state doesn't have. So I'm hoping that, and I know other jurisdictions, I will point out, Mako supported this position last year. And when Mako supports it, it means that the majority of the Democratic and Republican jurisdictions all want to be able to do this, because everybody realized no state money, no projects. That is no way to run a government, no way to, you know, build what you need. So I'm not optimistic that they'll get everything they need. I hope the legislature gives them some ability to raise some additional funds, that we're willing to look overall at the tax structure so we can bring some of the money in. You got, I think it's something like 41 companies to pay, corporations pay no taxes here. That's a joke. I mean, why does a small businessman, the guy running a sub shop on the street corner, pay taxes and a large corporation not pay taxes?
County Executive, the last thing I wanted to ask you about was the other thing that your peers have talked to me about, which was, again, in their discussions with MDOT. There seemed to be some discussion about counties being able to move forward with projects that may not be necessarily shovel ready if they were willing to come up with match money, the state share on their own. Were those also part of your discussions? And
well, that's exactly what I've been talking. That's the whole thing I just talked about. The counties can't come up with the money unless they've got taxing authority. The state has, you know, really held tight to the taxing authority. Ironically, the ability to raise, for example, to have a differential rate on commercial and residential property is allowed for municipalities. So every municipality in Montgomery County could have different rates of taxation, but counties aren't allowed to do that. And so it creates a poison pill for us. So if I wanted to raise money for bus rapid transit, I would have to, if I added a penny to the tax, it would not only sit on a developer, but would also sit on the county residents. And because $2 out of $3 we raise comes from county residents, basically, instead of having development pay for the infrastructure like they do in Virginia, we would be putting the burden primarily on taxpayers here. I don't want to do it. We don't need to do it. We shouldn't do it. And I think the other counties feel the same way. They don't want to pass these general taxes on to everybody in the county. They want to focus on the beneficiaries, which are going to be the areas we're trying to develop. And, you know, like I said, all you got to do is look at Virginia and see what they did.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Thank you, Brian. Up next, Kevin Dupree, DC News Now. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you all for your time. I wanted to go back to the bias-related vandalisms at these schools and places of worship in the county. County Executive, I just wanted to ask you, have you had kind of some collaborative conversations with MCPS, MCPD, and yourself? And if so, can you talk to me a little bit about, you know, what those conversations have been like?
I think, you know, the problem is just basic frustration over how you manage this. I mean, you don't know who the people are who are perpetrating it. Somebody gave the example, you might get camera footage, but if somebody's wearing a hoodie or a mask, you're not able to identify the people doing this. I think, you know, my conclusion is you're just going to have to provide more surveillance, and you're going to have to provide more covert surveillance until you actually find the person doing this, person or persons who are doing this, and bring them in, take them off the street. And then you know, my view is we will fully prosecute these people. You've got to be able to fully prosecute. But the schools, you know, it's their property, but they have no idea who's doing it. The police, if they had an idea who was doing it, they would have arrested them by now. people, I mean, you drive up in the middle of the night, you take a spray can out, you do some quick painting and you're gone. That's really hard to catch. You know, I don't have enough police to sit on every school property all night long. I would not be able to provide protection to everybody else in the county. So we're going to have to, I think, come up with some more aggressive surveillance techniques in order to find out who's doing this and put an end to it.
Yes, sir. And that was going to be my follow-up question, just about some potential solutions, but you answered that. So thank you very much.
Yeah. The solution is to take these people off the street. That's the solution.
Thank you, Kevin. Any follow-up questions? Are you done? Okay. Okay, members of the media, any more questions for the county executive and the officials this afternoon? No more questions? Going once, going twice? I guess we're done for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay safe.
Thank you all for being here.